Hello, my fantastic viewer. Where in this big world are you watching me from? A small, charming town or a grand, busy city? Let me know in the comments. And remember to share this video with your loved ones. It truly helps my channel grow. Let's kick things off. Travis Hunter moved through his house like smoke, silent, deliberate, almost unseen. The floor beneath him creaked faintly under the weight of memories, each board nailed in place by his own hands over 10 years ago. The instincts that had carried him through a dozen combat deployments now guided him through the eerie quiet of a living room that felt more like a war zone than a sanctuary. At 44, Travis exuded a quiet, dangerous composure. Silver threaded through his hair, his face etched with the harsh lessons of deserts and distant gunfire. He'd been forged in battle, but tonight, his pale blue eyes reflected a coldness more piercing than a sniper's scope. The house, once vibrant and warm, now felt hollow, like a museum built for a life that no longer existed. The walls still held the echoes of a life that had once felt real, framed snapshots of better days, a laughing kiss on his wedding day, wind-blown smiles in Maui, carefree afternoons in the backyard surrounded by friends. Rachel's laughter had once been his compass, guiding him toward peace. But now, those same echoes felt staged. Just 3 weeks ago, he'd flown home early from a private security detail in Colombia, ready to surprise the woman he'd cherished for 16 years. What he found instead was her phone, left out in plain view, unlocked, a careless mistake. The truth he uncovered wasn't a simple lapse of judgment, it was a campaign. The text threads weren't just intimate, they were surgical. She hadn't simply cheated. She had plotted. Every message revealed an agenda to dismantle everything he'd built, his home, his finances, his reputation. Rachel had aligned herself with a man who looked like he was built in a lab, broad-shouldered, bicep-heavy, and dumb enough to be dangerous. Together, they were laying the groundwork for Travis's ruin. But they'd missed one fatal detail. Travis didn't crumble under pressure. He adapted. For the last 21 days, he'd vanished from his own life, moving unnoticed, watching everything. He brought in Colin Vega, a former Delta Force teammate with a ruthless streak and a specialty in tactical divorce operations. Colin delivered in spades, surveillance photos, asset trails, a psychological breakdown of the interloper, Blake Kincaid, 34, Detroit-born. Blake stood 6'5" and clocked in at a swollen 260 pounds, most of it chemically enhanced. He owned several failing supplement stores, leased a penthouse he couldn't afford, and carried enough gambling debt to choke a cartel. A man driven not by strength, but by ego. Reckless, arrogant, insecure. Exactly the kind of man Rachel knew would provoke Travis's worst instincts. She was counting on it. Rachel had learned Travis's emotional triggers over years. She didn't just want to hurt him, she wanted to push him into an outburst that would arm her in court. One violent moment, and she'd hold all the cards: restraining orders, custody, credibility. Her manipulation was clinical, but like many before her, she mistook discipline for weakness. She didn't understand the man beneath the ribbons and citations. His phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "Out with Monica tonight. Don't wait up." Travis stared at the text. Monica had been in Phoenix for days. He'd confirmed that himself. Another lie. One more brick in a wall of deception that stretched back further than he'd ever guessed. He opened his laptop and pulled up the dossier Colin had built. The affair hadn't just started 8 months ago. It had roots that burrowed deep. Off-the-books accounts, coordinated stories. She had been logging their arguments like legal evidence, painting him as unstable, dangerous. A carefully edited narrative built to destroy him in slow motion. It was diabolical. She was manufacturing the monster she claimed she feared. In the darkened window pane, he caught sight of himself, a man scraped clean of illusion, distilled down to essence. In Afghanistan, they'd called him Ghost because he disappeared at will, only to reappear exactly where he was needed, when he was needed. Tonight the Ghost was done waiting. He picked up an encrypted phone and tapped out a single message to Colin. Phase 1 is green. The reply came immediately. Target confirmed. Meridian Hotel, room 412. For the first time in weeks, Travis allowed himself a smile. Not one of warmth, but of certainty. A hunter's smile, tight and knowing, the kind that came just before the strike. In his study, he reached behind a commendation plaque, his bronze star and purple heart reflecting softly under the lamp, and slid open a hidden safe. Inside, everything he'd once tried to walk away from remained intact. Not for sniping from afar this time. Tonight was about closeness, precision. As he readied himself, that familiar calm returned, the stillness before a breach. He had felt it countless times, just before the decisive moment. Rachel and her muscle-bound pawn thought they were manipulating a broken man. They were about to realize they had invited a scalpel to a sledgehammer fight. The elevator at the Meridian rose soundlessly, floor numbers blinking upward until it reached 4. Travis, expression unreadable, reviewed the final details Colin had compiled. What stood out now wasn't the affair. It was what Blake represented. He was more than just a fling. He was more than just a lover. He was a co-conspirator in something far darker than infidelity. Rachel had met Blake at his upscale supplement store, roughly 6 months after she started training at the elite gym he was affiliated with. What began as a flirtation evolved into a carefully orchestrated scheme. Blake was drowning in gambling debts, grasping for any financial lifeline, while Rachel needed someone with presence and menace, someone capable of pushing Travis into accepting a ruinous legal settlement. But their agenda reached further. For months, Rachel had been discreetly capturing their domestic life on audio and video, assembling a case that painted Travis as a volatile, traumatized veteran. Every outburst, every sharp word, every late-night episode was logged meticulously. It was the foundation for a restraining order she planned to file. Blake's task was to escalate things, to needle Travis, bait him, and trigger reactions born of years in combat zones. Their objective was cruel in its simplicity: provoke Travis into an act of violence, get him charged, and then claim everything: his home, his assets, his identity, as a victim of spousal abuse. Travis, trained to survive war zones, couldn't help but recognize the brutal efficiency of it all. Rachel had studied him like an enemy commander, uncovering every weakness, exploiting every deeply held belief. She counted on his loyalty, his sense of duty, to keep him paralyzed while she dismantled his world one piece at a time. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 4th floor. Travis advanced silently down the corridor, his steps measured, every instinct alert. From behind the door of room 412 came the sound of laughter, Rachel's familiar melodic giggle woven with Blake's smug, deep tone. They were reveling in their deception, celebrating the collapse of a man they deemed dangerous and obsolete. Colin's voice came through the earpiece in a near whisper. "Clear path. Security's distracted. 2 guards downstairs, nothing to worry about. Service stairwells open for exfil." Travis positioned himself just outside the suite, ears trained on the voices inside. Rachel was animated, her tone electric with anticipation. "Travis still thinks I'm staying with Monica. Tomorrow I file. I've got 3 months' worth of recordings. His yelling, the insomnia, the guns. My attorney says it's more than enough for a judge to issue a temporary restraining order." Blake responded, voice thick with smug satisfaction. "That's when I go to the house. Time to remind him he's not in charge anymore. He still thinks he's some respected hero. Let's see how he handles someone with real control." "Don't forget," Rachel cautioned. "We need him to be the aggressor. He has to be the one who snaps. It won't work unless he looks dangerous." Travis's jaw locked. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a trap built with surgical precision, designed to obliterate his life and leave nothing behind. He'd heard enough. Using a key card Colin had acquired from a contact at the hotel, Travis unlocked the door. The lock disengaged with a soft click, and he stepped inside. Rachel and Blake were sprawled on the couch, papers covering the coffee table, champagne glasses half full. She was wearing the crimson dress he'd given her for their anniversary 2 years prior. Blake, shirtless, looked like a walking advertisement for anabolic rage. They froze at the sight of him. The color drained from Rachel's face. "Travis?" she said, voice hitching. "What are you doing here?" Blake rose slowly, his posture tightening, muscles coiling. "You need to leave. Now turn around and walk out." Travis remained still, unreadable, his voice even. "Just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd meet the guy you picked to fill my shoes." Rachel scrambled to grab the documents, but it was too late. Travis had already seen them. Bank records, property transfers, a timeline of fabricated incidents. The entire plot was laid bare. "This isn't what it looks like," she said quickly, her tone reverting to the same feigned innocence she'd used to sidestep lies during their marriage. "No?" Travis replied, voice calm and detached. "Because it sure looks like you and your new partner here are staging a takedown built on lies and forged evidence." Blake stepped forward, puffing himself up in an attempt to intimidate. "You need to walk away before this turns into something you regret." Travis gave a faint, cold smile, the same expression that had preceded violence on more than one battlefield. "Something ugly, you mean?" he said quietly. "Tell me what that looks like." For a heartbeat, Blake hesitated. Something in Travis's stillness, the chill in his gaze, registered as dangerous. But pride, and whatever was coursing through his veins, pushed him forward. "Ugly means you walk out on your feet," Blake growled, "or I put you through the glass." Travis didn't blink. He gave a small nod, as if considering his options. "I appreciate your honesty, but I think you've got the wrong idea about who's really in charge." Travis took a deliberate step forward. Blake instinctively positioned himself between Travis and the room, shoulders squaring, fists clenching as tension rippled through his body. This was the moment Rachel had been counting on. Travis was to appear as the aggressor, Blake, the reluctant protector. Everything captured by the hotel's ever-watchful security system. But Travis didn't lunge. He didn't even raise a hand. Instead, he lifted his voice just enough so the audio recorder, hidden on Rachel as he suspected, would catch his next line loud and clear. "Curious, Blake, has Rachel ever brought up your little problem at the poker table? The one that torpedoed your marriage and left you in debt to some rather unforgiving individuals?" Blake's complexion went pale, the color draining as if a plug had been pulled. "What are you even talking about?" "Marcus Torino sends his regards. He's quite eager to recover the $120,000 you still owe him, in untraceable offshore money." The name hit Blake like a sledgehammer. Marcus Torino, Detroit's most infamous loan shark. His reputation for brutal collections bordered on myth. Rachel looked confused, clearly out of the loop, but Blake didn't need any further context. Somehow, Travis had dug up the one secret Blake thought he'd buried for good. "How the hell do you—" Blake started, then cut himself off as the realization settled like ice in his stomach. Travis's smile turned predatory. "I mentioned a misunderstanding earlier. You thought you were calling the shots in this little performance." He pivoted toward the door, then turned back with one final parting shot. "Oh, and Rachel?" Monica phoned. "Said she appreciated the holiday card you mailed her in Phoenix." Interesting thing about phone records, judges are very fond of them. As Travis exited, Rachel let out a sharp gasp. Blake's panicked voice quickly followed, full of confusion and disbelief. Only now did they begin to understand just how thoroughly their scheme had been hijacked. What they didn't yet realize was that Travis hadn't just flipped their trap, he'd completely re-engineered it to suit his own ends. The subterranean garage below Travis's office hadn't been selected at random. Reinforced concrete, limited entry points, and, crucially, no security coverage in the shadowy corner where the meeting had been set. Some conversations were meant to stay off the record. Travis arrived early, choosing a spot where he could observe the whole space and keep a clean path to the exit. Old habits didn't die easily, and tonight, those instincts might keep him breathing. 15 minutes later, the rumble of Blake's BMW broke the silence, reverberating off the garage walls like distant thunder. The muscular man climbed out with the swagger of someone used to imposing his will through raw intimidation. But Travis wasn't fooled. The bravado was brittle. He saw it in Blake's darting eyes, in the restless twitch of his hands. Marcus Torino's name had rattled him more than he cared to admit. This wasn't the simple strong-arm setup Blake thought he'd signed up for. "You said you wanted to talk," Blake called out, his voice echoing. "So let's hear it." Travis emerged from the gloom, his movements fluid and calculating. Anyone familiar with violence would have recognized it instantly. "This is your last chance to walk away." Blake gave a short laugh, but it was hollow and uneasy. "Walk away from what? From Rachel? She's the best thing to happen to me in a long time." "From the woman who's using you to get to me," Travis replied, his voice flat but firm, "and who won't hesitate to dump you the second she gets her payout." The words landed hard. Travis saw the doubt flicker across Blake's face, the same crack in his certainty Travis had glimpsed back at the hotel. "You don't know what you're talking about," Blake said, but his tone betrayed the lie. Travis pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Rachel's voice filled the space, sharp, cold, and unmistakably damning. "Blake's convenient for now, but I can't stay tied to a nobody forever. Once Travis is out of the picture and I've got the settlement, I'll come up with a reason to ditch him." Blake's jaw tightened as emotions surged, fury, pain, and a sudden sick realization crashing together in a silent explosion behind his eyes. "Where do you think all of this came from, Blake?" "She's been recording it all, every single word, every veiled threat. She's compiling evidence that you manipulated her into that relationship, that you blackmailed her into helping you rip me off. You weren't her partner, you were just the scapegoat." Blake felt the words slam into him, a sudden blow to the gut. His mind had been so tangled up in chasing the payout, so focused on silencing the creditors breathing down his neck, he'd never considered that Rachel might be pulling her own strings behind the scenes. "It makes no difference," he snapped, his voice coiled tight with desperation. "I still need that money. Marcus isn't going to care who's responsible when he shows up to settle the score." Travis nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Which is exactly why we're here." He gestured around the empty garage. "No one's listening, no surveillance, no interference, just you and me, settling what needs to be settled." Blake squared his shoulders, the tension snapping into a familiar posture. This was his arena, where threats were currency and violence solved problems. "Turn around and leave," he growled, muscles flexing beneath his shirt, "before I put you in the ground." That stare, he'd used it countless times, in gyms, on dark streets, in places where the strongest voice usually won. But Travis's slight smile didn't falter. It was the same detached expression that preceded clean kills in foreign war zones. "Muscle can't outrun a bullet," he said, voice calm and even. "And after a dozen years as a SEAL sniper, I don't miss." Blake's smirk disintegrated the instant a red laser dot flickered on his forehead, dancing in sync with his racing pulse. The beam vanished, but Travis's hand never moved from the grip of his pistol. Blake froze, suddenly aware of the gulf between posturing and precision. "I could end this now," Travis said, his voice disturbingly level. "It would be self-defense. You threatened me. I felt at risk. With your rap sheet, assaults, violent outbursts, no jury would think twice." Blake's body trembled. "Then what do you want?" "Simple," Travis replied. "The truth. Marcus already knows where to find you. Rachel's made sure you're the fall guy. And me? I'm very good at making people vanish, permanently." He holstered the weapon, but stayed alert, his eyes never leaving Blake. "Or," he added, "you can choose a different way out." "What kind of way?" Travis pulled an envelope from his jacket and let it fall at Blake's feet. "One-way ticket to Mexico City. 20 grand, untraceable cash, enough to disappear. Somewhere Marcus won't think to look." Blake stared at the envelope as though it might explode. "Why would you do that for me?" "I'm not interested in killing you, Blake," Travis said, his smile cold and calculated. "I want you out of the picture, gone from Rachel's life. Let her climb out of her mess without you looming behind her like a shadow." Blake bent down slowly, his hand shaking as he picked up the envelope. He opened it. Inside was everything Travis had promised. A way out, a clean start. "What's the price?" "There's no trick here," Travis said. "Just consequences. If you ever come back, if you contact Rachel, stir up trouble, or make yourself known, I'll find you. And next time, there will be no offer. Only an ending." Blake looked around the dimly lit garage, and the truth finally sank in. He'd been played from every angle. Rachel had set him up. Travis had closed the trap. His only options were escape or destruction. "The flight leaves in 3 hours," Travis said, voice hard. "You should be on it." Without another word, Blake turned and made for his car, the envelope clenched tightly in his fist. As he reached for the door handle, Travis called out one last time. "Let me ask you something, Blake. Did you really think you could intimidate someone who's spent over a decade hunting the world's most dangerous men?" Blake didn't look back. He didn't have to. The sag in his shoulders and the speed of his retreat spoke louder than anything he could have said. Travis watched as the BMW disappeared up the incline and out of sight. Calmly, he pulled out his phone and made the call. "First objective is complete," he reported. "We're set to move on to phase 2. Rachel was about to learn the consequences of provoking someone with military training. Unlike Blake, there would be no gesture of peace, no easy way out. She had summoned a force far beyond her control. Now she'd have to face it head-on. Hidden beneath Travis's house was his nerve center, a fortified basement with steel-reinforced walls Rachel had never seen, let alone entered. Inside was everything he needed for precision operations: surveillance rigs, encrypted lines, and a carefully structured timeline of Rachel's daily life. Across from him, Colin laid out photos and documents like a strategist preparing for war. "Blake landed in Mexico City," he noted. "Customs logged his arrival 2 hours ago. He's not coming back." Travis said nothing, his gaze locked on the series of photographs tracing Rachel's routines over the past week. With Blake gone, her stability had started to erode. Her movements grew sloppy, each one revealing just how deep the betrayal went. "She's been making rounds to law firms," Colin continued. 3 so far, trying to find someone gutsy enough to take the fraud angle without Blake backing her. Travis studied one of the images, Rachel leaving a downtown office, anxiety carved into her face. "Any takers?" 2 lawyers dismissed her after digging into the case. But the third, Harrison Grant, he's built for this sort of thing. Hungry, reckless. He specializes in the cases no one else will touch. Grant had made a name handling messy divorce battles, especially those involving PTSD claims from former service members. His approach was ruthless. He weaponized the media to demonize the opposition. "He's already filed preliminary motions," Colin said. "Restraining order, asset lock, the works. He's exploiting the system's instinct to protect when a vet is accused of abuse." That old, razor-edged calm settled over Travis, the same unshakable composure that had made him so effective in the field. "Where's his weak spot?" Colin gave a crooked grin. "His ego. Grant thrives on attention. To him, this is front-page material, a victimized woman squaring off against a violent ex-soldier." Travis absorbed the information. Rachel had shifted tactics. Subtle manipulations gave way to open confrontation. She was using the justice system as her weapon. But like every opponent who struck first, she had revealed her strategy in the process. "She's staying with her sister now," Colin added. "Kendra West, divorced, has 2 kids, lives in Riverside Heights, nice neighborhood, but she's stretched thin financially." Travis flipped open Kendra's dossier. She'd once welcomed him as family, a friendly face during the early years of his marriage. The sting of her unwitting betrayal cut deeper for that reason. "She doesn't have the full story," Colin said. "Rachel's feeding her lies, claiming you've turned violent. Kendra honestly believes she's shielding her from an abusive ex." Travis shut the file. His decision was final. "Then we show Kendra the truth, but we do it carefully. She's not the enemy." Colin nodded in agreement. "What about the money? Any movement?" Travis opened his laptop and brought up the financial records. Over the last 8 months, Rachel had quietly drained funds from their joint accounts, slipping money into a personal account under her maiden name. The transactions were scattered and subtle, designed to evade detection. "She's pocketed close to 40 grand, Travis said. "Skimmed from our accounts and racked up on credit cards I didn't even know existed." "Classic credit and marital fraud," Colin said. "If we pursue it right, she's looking at real prison time." Travis's smile was cold and razor thin. She always had a head for finances, but she never counted on someone like me digging through her ledgers. This next step would demand precision. Rachel was counting on the legal system's tendency to err on the side of caution, especially in cases involving a veteran and accusations of abuse. She was hoping he'd respond with fury, feeding the picture she was painting. But Travis wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Instead, he'd lean into her expectations, just enough to let her tighten the noose herself. "I need you to do something that's going to seem backwards," Travis said. "We're going to let her believe she's winning." Colin raised a brow. "What's the angle?" "Get to Grant," Travis said, "quietly through the back door. Let it slip that I'm overwhelmed financially, that the breakup is gutting me from the inside out. Leak just enough for him to see weakness. You want him to think you're flailing?" Travis gave a single nod. "I want him to believe I'm an easy target. Encourage him to ask for everything. The house, the bank accounts, even my pension. Let him get greedy enough that his motives become obvious." Colin nodded briskly, understanding the tactic instantly. If Grant comes in too aggressively, the case starts to look less like a cry for safety and more like a blatant cash grab. Exactly. Once that overreach hits the official record, Rachel's narrative begins to unravel. She stops resembling a victim and starts looking like someone exploiting the system. Travis rose from his chair and walked over to the large map pinned to the wall. Dots marked key places: Rachel's gym, her favorite cafe, her attorney's office. "What's her greatest weakness?" he asked. "Her fixation on appearing wounded," Colin replied without pause. "Her whole story hinges on being the abandoned wife of a volatile ex-soldier." Travis followed the route she traveled daily with his finger. "Then we give her the stage she wants. Let her perform, only this time, the cameras are rolling and the witnesses aren't hers." Colin leaned forward, intrigued. "What's your angle?" Travis's smile was cold enough to cut glass. "Rachel thinks she's the master of manipulation. Let's show her what actual psychological warfare looks like." He turned to Colin, the chill in his gaze echoing the dread he used to instill in enemies across the globe. "She created a monster to justify her lies. We'll show her one, just not the kind she expected." Every Thursday, the Riverside Community Center hosted a support group for spouses of veterans grappling with PTSD. For 6 weeks now, Rachel had been showing up, carefully crafting the image of a quiet, emotionally worn survivor. Across the street, Travis sat in his parked car, binoculars trained on her as she slid effortlessly into her weekly performance. She always arrived a few minutes early, chose a seat that guaranteed the facilitator's attention, and spent the hour reinforcing her carefully spun narrative. "She's got them completely fooled," Colin's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Our guy inside says she's basically their poster child, survivor of a turbulent marriage with a damaged ex-soldier." Travis watched as Rachel left the building, surrounded by sympathetic faces and comforting hugs. Everyone around her saw bravery in her eyes, pain in her silence. That was the sickest part. Their kindness was genuine, and Rachel was using it like currency. "Phase 1's done," Travis said flatly. "This morning, Grant filed for a restraining order, also submitted an emergency motion to seize control of all marital assets. He's demanding the house, the savings account, and $4,000 a month in support." Colin let out a low whistle. "That's aggressive, even for him." "Too aggressive." The judge is already skeptical. No police reports, no ER visits, nothing concrete, just Rachel's over-dramatized stories and a suspiciously tidy timeline. As Rachel's car disappeared down the street, Travis turned the key in his ignition. Time to introduce her to the phantom she invented. The next phase would unfold at Morrison's Coffee, the spot Rachel religiously visited every Tuesday. Travis had her schedule committed to memory. She arrived like clockwork at 8:15, ordered some complicated latte, and sank into the same booth for exactly 1 hour of screen time. Today the routine was going to break. At 8:20, Travis walked through the cafe's front door, giving her 5 minutes to settle into her usual rhythm. He ordered a simple black coffee and chose a table with a perfect line of sight, Rachel in one corner, the security cameras clearly angled toward her. His team had already confirmed they were recording. When she glanced up and spotted him, all color drained from her face. Exactly what he wanted. That expression, shocked, unsettled, would be preserved on video, along with everything that followed. He approached with measured steps, hands in full view, empty and unthreatening. Every move was intentional, non-confrontational to the average observer, but specifically calibrated to provoke the exact reaction her handlers had taught her to display. "Hello, Rachel," he said calmly, stopping just shy of the space most judges consider personal distance. Her voice shot up, loud enough for every ear in the cafe. "Travis, you're not supposed to be here!" The restraining order hadn't officially gone into effect. Travis broke the silence with an even, composed voice. "Your lawyer jumped the gun. Until those papers are handed to me directly, I'm under no obligation to keep my distance." Rachel's hand trembled ever so slightly as she raised her phone, a deliberate gesture meant to imply she was afraid. "I'm calling the police." "Naturally," Travis said, his tone raised just enough to be overheard. "That's always been your move, hasn't it? Let someone else do the fighting for you." Around them, the usual hum of conversation in the cafe dimmed. Patrons began to tune in, their attention drawn by a tension they couldn't yet name. Travis welcomed it. What mattered were the observers, people who would later recall his composure and her visible distress. "You're frightening me," Rachel said, her voice cracking in a way that felt too deliberate. Travis recognized the act, practiced fragility. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her without asking. His movements were slow, measured, intentionally non-aggressive. "Is that true, or are you just staging this for the crowd?" Her gaze swept the cafe, confirming the obvious. They had drawn an audience, and she was playing to it. Several nearby customers looked ready to step in if she gave the signal. "You're doing it again," she said, louder now, "trying to corner me. This is exactly the kind of behavior that made me seek protection." Travis leaned forward just enough to stay within the view of any security cameras, but spoke softly enough that eavesdropping would require effort. "Let's be precise, Rachel. What exactly are you accusing me of? When did I threaten you? Give one concrete example that wasn't crafted for your affidavit." For a split second, her performance faltered. Travis saw the flicker in her expression. The story she'd been controlling was beginning to slip. "You don't need to say a word," she whispered. "I haven't forgotten what you did, what happened overseas." He offered a faint, wistful smile. To strangers it might seem sympathetic. To her, it was unmistakably a warning. "I served my country overseas. What I'm doing now is defending myself from someone trying to destroy my life with lies and drama." A barista in a stained apron approached, hesitant but determined. "Sorry to interrupt, but some of the guests are getting uncomfortable. Maybe this conversation would be better outside?" Travis stood without hesitation, careful to appear cooperative. "Of course, I'm sorry for the disruption." Rachel remained seated. Her voice rose, strained and urgent. "I don't feel safe leaving with him. Someone please call the police." Travis turned toward the room, meeting the stares of several bystanders. "Rachel, I haven't yelled, touched you, or made any threatening moves. Everyone here saw that." There were slow nods. Uncertain glances passed from table to table. Her fear didn't match the composed man they'd witnessed. Travis reached into his wallet and placed a 20 next to her untouched drink. "I'll leave. Stay as long as you need to feel at ease." He moved toward the exit, his pace unhurried. Behind him, he heard the unmistakable tone of her voice rising again, first to Harrison Grant, then to emergency services. She sounded panicked, accusing her estranged husband of violating an order that hadn't yet taken effect, of making threats she couldn't quite articulate. Outside, a surveillance van sat idling. Colin was behind the wheel, watching. "She looked totally unhinged by the end," he said, as Travis slid into the passenger seat. Travis fastened his seatbelt, pleased. She could cry harassment, but those in the cafe would remember something else entirely. a composed man calmly enduring a scene he hadn't caused. His phone buzzed. David Chun, his divorce attorney, was calling. "Travis, I just got off with Grant. He claims you violated the order and threatened Rachel at a cafe." A satisfied smile played on Travis's face. "Perfect. Let him know I'm looking forward to the courtroom reveal. Surveillance tapes, witness statements, the whole show." Travis's voice remained icy and composed. "And David, don't forget to subpoena the footage from the coffee shop. I suspect it'll be very illuminating." As Travis drove away from Morrison's office, a faint smirk played at the corner of his mouth. Everything had unfolded with surgical precision. Rachel had reacted exactly as predicted, so predictably, in fact, that her dramatic display had exposed just how rehearsed her so-called vulnerability really was. Phase 2, complete. Now came the true test, engineering her collapse so meticulously that it would look like her own doing. Harrison Grant's law firm was housed on the 15th floor of a gleaming glass high-rise downtown. The panoramic views weren't just impressive, they were tactical, designed to rattle anyone facing off across the table. In one of the sleek, transparent conference rooms, Travis sat opposite his attorney, David Chun. Documents and transcripts covered the table, the foundation of their next calculated move. "Grant's under pressure," David said, spreading a fresh stack of documents. "That stunt at the cafe blew up in their faces. The footage makes you look rational, calm. Rachel, on the other hand, she comes off as unhinged, like she was convinced you were a threat to her life." Travis skimmed the compiled eyewitness reports. 3 separate patrons had described Rachel's behavior as erratic and exaggerated. Each one had noted Travis's calm presence, his respectful demeanor. "It gets better," David said, leaning closer. "Her 911 call and her testimony don't match. She claimed you blocked her path, but the video clearly shows you keeping a safe distance and leaving the moment she asked." Travis nodded slowly. This was only the opening salvo. He knew Grant well enough to expect a counterstrike. It was how he operated. "What's his next move?" Travis asked. David rotated his laptop to face him, spreadsheets and account ledgers popping up on screen. "He's coming after your money. Filed to freeze every asset tied to your name. Says you're moving cash around, planning to disappear." Travis reviewed the filings. Aggressive, overreaching. Judges don't sign off on that kind of freeze without concrete proof. He's bluffing, and it's Rachel who's been funneling money off the books, not me. David's tone shifted subtly. "That's what makes it interesting. Grant doesn't know she's been hiding accounts. She hasn't disclosed them, even to him. She's concealing assets from her own legal team." A controlled surge of satisfaction flared in Travis's chest. Watching their strategy unravel from the inside out never failed to deliver a quiet thrill. "When we expose those hidden funds," Travis said evenly, "we dismantle her credibility, and we make Grant look reckless. He'll be vulnerable to court sanctions." David gave a tight nod. "That's just the start." He pulled up another file. A new name appeared on the screen, and Travis's expression darkened. "She's been meeting with people connected to Marcus Torino." The mention hit like a bucket of ice water. Torino, Detroit's notorious enforcer, the same man who'd been hunting Blake, now being drawn into this domestic battlefield. "Give me the rundown," Travis said, voice low and steady. David slid over a file of surveillance photos, courtesy of their investigator, Colin. In them, Rachel was clearly visible entering a known front for Torino's operation. Inside, she was seated across from Vincent Scarano, Torino's chief muscle for collection work. "After Blake dropped off the radar, she reached out to them," David said. "She's trying to point the finger at you, implying you had a hand in Blake's disappearance. Either you're hiding him, or you know where he is." Travis studied the images, processing the implications. This wasn't just courtroom games anymore. Rachel had stepped into a far more dangerous arena. "Torino isn't some fool she can manipulate into settling her scores," he said coldly. "She's inviting chaos." David's expression was grim. "Scarano's been snooping, asking questions about your past, your finances, your daily routines. She's feeding him private information. That old, familiar heat, the one born in combat zones and life-or-death moments, began to rise in Travis's chest. Rachel had just escalated the war to a place where physical danger was no longer hypothetical. "She's not just playing dirty anymore," he said. "She's inviting criminals into the fight." "What's Torino's angle?" he asked after a beat. "Blake owed him 120, David replied. "Now that Blake's vanished, Torino's looking for someone else to foot the bill. Rachel's convinced him you know where Blake is, or you're worth squeezing." Travis stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out over the teeming city below. Somewhere out there, dangerous men were being fed a carefully crafted lie, a lie that could destroy him. A debt that wasn't his, a threat that could no longer be ignored. "This shifts everything," he finally said, his voice low. Rachel wasn't just after his wallet or trying to destroy his marriage. She was playing with his life. David closed the folder slowly, concern etched deep into his brow. "What's the plan now?" Travis turned toward his lawyer, and the change in his demeanor gave David pause. The composed, law-abiding client he'd known had vanished. In his place stood something far more dangerous, a man no longer restrained by legality or patience. A killer by training, now provoked by amateurs blind to the consequences. "I want the divorce expedited," Travis said, voice like steel. "Counterclaim her with everything. Embezzlement, forged documents, lying under oath. Make it clear she's not the victim here. She's the one on the attack." David began scribbling notes quickly. "And Marcus Torino?" A smile tugged at the corner of Travis's mouth, sharp and merciless. "Torino thinks I'm just some docile husband he can lean on to clean up someone else's mess. Time he learned the difference between a pushover and someone who pushes back, with force." He pulled out his encrypted phone and tapped out a brief message to Colin. "Phase 3 is a go. Activate Torino measures." The response came immediately. "Acknowledged. Engaging combat mode." When Travis looked up again, David looked unsettled. "You need to understand what we're really dealing with here," Travis said, his tone grave. "Rachel didn't just take this to divorce court. She dragged organized crime into my life. She's trying to extort money I never owed, and she's doing it by putting me in someone's crosshairs. This changes everything." David swallowed hard, his voice uncertain. "Travis, whatever it is you're thinking." "I'm thinking about survival," Travis cut him off, standing. "Everything else is just logistics." As he walked out of the office, old instincts awakened within him, his mind sharpening, his body preparing. Rachel thought she was in control, pulling strings by involving Torino's crew. But all she'd done was give Travis the green light. What might have looked like overkill in a courtroom now fell under the banner of justified self-defense. She didn't just imagine a monster to justify her actions. She summoned the real one. Salvatore's, Marcus Torino's polished restaurant in Detroit's Little Italy, carried a refined exterior. But to Travis, it was elegance masking rot, a facade of fine dining hiding something diseased. As twilight settled over the city, Travis approached with practiced vigilance, analyzing escape routes, blind spots, and threats. This wasn't a dinner outing. Inside, the host guided him to a secluded room in the back, the kind where business was handled away from the public eye. Marcus Torino waited there. He wasn't large or overtly menacing, mid-50s, silver hair, a suit that whispered wealth and control. But he didn't need muscle. He had people for that. One of them, Vincent Scarano, stood nearby, a walking slab of muscle and scar tissue, the embodiment of years of outsourced brutality. 2 additional men were posted near the wall. Their silence wasn't decorative, they were pros. "Mr. Hunter," Torino said, motioning to the seat opposite him. "Thanks for making the time." Travis took the chair, posture steady, eyes alert. "Let's not pretend this is a social call, Marcus. Your quarrel is with Blake Kincaid, not me. I don't owe you a cent, and I'm not footing his bill." Torino delicately sliced into his veal, as precise as a surgeon. "Your wife tells a different story. She seems to think you helped Blake disappear, maybe even planned it." Travis leaned back, completely in control. "She's playing you, Marcus. Using your reputation to pressure me into surrendering in divorce court. That's all this is." Scarano shifted, preparing to speak, but Torino silenced him with a flick of the hand. Maybe, he mused, but the debt remains. And when someone vanishes with my money, I look for other solutions. Travis's jaw tightened. Let me rephrase this, businessman to businessman. I understand leverage, but you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm not some nervous suburban guy you can intimidate into submission. I'm ex-Navy SEAL, 12 years, combat tested. I don't bluff, and I don't flinch. If you or your guys come after me, you won't find cash. You'll find a war you're not prepared to fight. Scarano stiffened, ready for violence, but Torino remained composed, intrigued even. Interesting, he said. Your wife predicted you might say something like that. Said you were unstable. Claimed you had PTSD. Said you make threats you're too broken to follow through on. Travis's expression gave away nothing, but a lethal gleam in his eyes made Scarano instinctively inch backward. Vincent, Travis said in a level voice, locking eyes with him. Answer me this. How many people have you killed? The question seemed to blindside Scarano. He squinted, confused. Come again? It's not a trick question. I want a straight answer. Since you started running collections for Marcus, how many people have you actually put in the ground? Not intimidated, not hurt, dead. Scarano glanced toward Torino, uncertain how to handle the unexpected interrogation. Travis gave him a slight nod of permission. That's what I thought, Travis said, voice low. Let me save you the math on my end. 47. That's my number. 47 confirmed kills, hand to hand. That doesn't include tactical strikes, drones, or indirect fire. I mean personal, close enough to see their eyes before they stopped moving. It was always kill or be killed. A dense silence settled over the room. With deliberate calm, Travis reached into his coat and retrieved a thick manila envelope. He laid it flat on the table. Here's what I brought you, Marcus. Surveillance photos of your home, your wife's daily schedule, Vincent's building, and the elementary school where your daughter teaches. Color drained from Torino's face as he pulled the photographs from the envelope. One after another, his private life was put on display. A photo of him entering his supposedly secure penthouse. His wife browsing produce at a neighborhood market she believed was under protection. His daughter leaving the school building, unaware she was being watched. All taken this morning, Travis said coolly, as if discussing the weather. If I can get close enough for these, I can get close enough for more. Scarano's hand shifted subtly toward his side, but Travis's voice froze him. Vincent, he murmured, you've got a red dot on your chest. My spotter's got you lined up from a rooftop across the street. Try to draw your weapon, and you'll never clear the holster. Scarano lowered his eyes, spotting the crimson dot dancing in rhythm with his breath, just like Blake had, back in that garage. Torino slumped back into his chair, teetering between dread and reluctant admiration. You're not bluffing, he said, voice dry. Not for a second, Travis replied. Here's what you're going to do. Forget the name Blake Kincaid. Tell my wife you're dropping any attempts to collect from me, and make damn sure none of your people so much as look in my direction again. He rose, leaving the photos on the table as if they were a signed agreement. In return, I won't dismantle your operation piece by piece until there's nothing left but rumors. Torino stared at the pictures, the full impact of the threat crashing down like a tidal wave. He realized then that he had underestimated the wrong man. And if I refuse? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Travis's smile was a blade, sharp and lethal. Then by sunrise, everyone you care about disappears. No notes, no signs, your wife, your daughter, Vincent, the rest of your crew, all gone, erased. He leaned in close, his words ice-cold and intimate. I spent over 10 years making ghosts, Marcus. I've erased entire networks in a single night. You think your little crime ring is going to slow me down? Torino glanced at Scarano, who was now sweating through his shirt despite the chilled restaurant air. The red dot never wavered. After a long silence, Torino finally nodded, slow, resigned. We're clear. Travis gave a single nod and turned to leave. Oh, and Marcus, he said, pausing at the door. When Rachel asks why you suddenly dropped it, repeat my words to her. Every last one. As Travis stepped outside, the restaurant doors closing behind him, he heard Torino shouting orders, scrambling to regain control of a power structure that had just collapsed. Colin's voice crackled in Travis's earpiece. All targets standing down. Threat diffused. A grim smile crept across Travis's face as he approached his car. Rachel had believed sicking the mob on him would back him into a corner. Instead, she'd handed him a legitimate excuse to start eliminating threats with plausible deniability. But more importantly, she'd revealed her cards, her real motives, and that was the kind of intel Travis valued most. Because Travis was done playing defense. The counterattack had begun, and Rachel was about to find out what a no-holds-barred war truly looked like. Her unraveling began on a quiet Tuesday, when federal agents raided the offices of Harrison Grant's prestigious law firm. From his command center, Travis watched live coverage with quiet satisfaction as agents marched out box after box of seized records. Fraud, racketeering, conspiracy. It's the full package, Colin announced, monitoring multiple screens. Minimum 20 years if he flips. It turned out your divorce case wasn't the only one he had tampered with. Fabricated proof and coerced witnesses had become a pattern. Travis gave a subtle nod, but his eyes weren't on the conversation. He was glued to another screen, where Rachel's panicked voice echoed through a live feed. With Grant out of the game, her legal scaffolding had collapsed in a single night. No reputable lawyer would dare touch a case so riddled with forged documents and manipulated testimony. She's losing control, Travis observed, watching her pace like a caged animal in her sister Kendra's living room. Desperation leads to bad decisions. At that moment, his phone buzzed on the desk, an incoming call from Kendra's number. Travis, we need to talk. Rachel's voice was strained, stripped of its usual composure. Fear now bled through her words where there had once been cold calculation. Hello, Rachel. I'm guessing you've heard what happened to Harrison. You did this, she hissed. You destroyed my lawyer, turned Torino against me, made Blake disappear. Travis remained composed. I protected myself. That's not the same as going on the offensive. For the first time in what felt like years, her voice cracked under the weight of genuine vulnerability. What do you want from me? He didn't respond right away. The question deserved more than a quick answer. What did he want? Retribution felt beneath him. Too crude, too small compared to the depth of the wounds she'd inflicted. This wasn't about the collapse of a marriage. This was about a targeted attempt to erase who he was, professionally, personally, completely. I want you to take responsibility, he finally said. You need to acknowledge what you've done. I'll withdraw the restraining order, she offered quickly. We can call off the divorce, maybe even repair this. No, Travis said, his tone firm, final. You went too far. You brought criminals into something that should have stayed between us. You tried to set me up as an abuser. You emptied our accounts. You lied in court. He heard her breath catch on the other end, rapid and shallow. What are you going to do to me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Travis's reply was disarmingly calm, which only made it more unsettling. I'm stepping back. I'm no longer going to protect you from the consequences of your own actions. Silence stretched between them, brittle and electric. I'm pregnant, she blurted out suddenly. The words landed with force, knocking the air from his lungs. What? I'm 8 weeks along. It's yours, Travis. He shut his eyes, trying to absorb the weight of what she'd just said. His mind raced, evaluating every implication. If it was true, nothing would be the same. A child changed everything. It made vengeance irrelevant, or at least far more complicated. Then prove it, he said at last. What? I need evidence. Paternity confirmation, medical records, something that shows dates, timelines. If it's mine, I'll know within a day. She didn't respond, but her silence screamed through the static. It's Blake's, isn't it? Travis said quietly. That's what's really breaking you right now. A faint sob crackled through the line. Travis, please. That's why Blake disappeared. I confronted him. Travis continued, the puzzle pieces falling into place. He found out. He suspected the baby might be his, and he couldn't handle the truth, so he ran. Travis stood up, walked to the large map pinned on the wall, and followed Rachel's recent movements with a fingertip. How long were you planning to let me believe it was mine? Only after the divorce? Only once I was drained dry, supporting a child that may not even be mine? Rachel's voice shook with desperation. It doesn't have to end like this. We still have a chance to fix what's broken. Travis's words were cold and sharp. No, Rachel. That chance is gone. You've lied about everything. The affair, the documents, the finances, your motives. What reason do I have to trust you now? He ended the call before she could answer and immediately dialed his lawyer. David, I need to file for a paternity test. If she's really expecting, we need to verify the father before we finalize anything. David responded carefully. And if the baby turns out to be yours? I'll take full responsibility, Travis said firmly. I'll raise the child properly. But if it's not mine, I want her held accountable for fraud, for lying under oath, and for every cent she stole. Travis made his way upstairs to the kitchen, poured himself a strong drink, and stared out the window at the backyard, the same yard where he used to picture his future children laughing. Even that dream had been poisoned by her lies. His phone vibrated. A text from Colin lit up the screen. She just left her sister's house. She's heading toward the city. Looks like she's running. Travis wasn't surprised. With her attorney behind bars, her security gone, and the pregnancy lie exposed, Rachel had no moves left. He replied without hesitation. Stay on her, do not engage. Colin responded. What if she tries to flee the state? Travis's response came with a grim smile. She won't get far. She's already flagged. Passports locked down. Airports and borders are on alert. As night crept in, Travis returned to the room where he monitored everything. Watching her unravel was like watching a slow collapse, calculated and inevitable. Just as he'd anticipated, she was floundering, draining funds from hidden accounts, reaching out to shady contacts who could turn on her, leaving behind digital evidence that would make building a case almost effortless. She'd spent months crafting his downfall, never once considering the cost if her scheme imploded. Now, she was discovering the line between manipulation and a real war. Travis had responded with precision, brutality, and unshakable resolve, transforming every one of her lies into ammunition, every trap she set into her own downfall. In the end, it wasn't him who destroyed her. She'd built the pyre herself and struck the match. Her end was in sight, and justice was close behind. But before the final curtain fell, Travis wanted her to witness, beyond all doubt, how thoroughly she'd been outplayed. She was apprehended at sunrise, 3 days after she ran. State troopers found her sleeping in her car at a rest stop just outside Phoenix. Travis watched the footage of the arrest unfold live on television. There was no sense of victory, only the heavy quiet of resolution. Their final encounter took place at the county jail's visitation room, separated by reinforced glass under constant watch. The woman across from him barely resembled the person he once married. Gone was the carefully curated appearance, replaced by hollow eyes and the defeated look of someone with nothing left. You look worn out, Travis said as he sat across from her. Her voice was faint through the intercom. You destroyed my life. Travis's tone was measured, almost soft. No, Rachel, you did that on your own. I just stopped letting you destroy mine. She studied him, searching for any trace of the man she once loved. When did you become like this? He paused, thinking carefully before answering. Probably the day I realized you were never who you claimed to be. He leaned forward slightly. You were acting the whole time, weren't you? Pretending to be devoted, while plotting behind my back. For a moment, the facade cracked. Emotion flickered in her expression. I did love you, she murmured. At first, but after your deployments, you changed. You closed yourself off. It was as if I had been tethered for years to someone I never truly understood. And when it came time to choose between healing and betrayal, you didn't hesitate. You picked betrayal. Rachel wiped at her damp cheeks with an unsteady hand. I've made mistakes, she said softly. Travis's reply was swift and cutting. No, Rachel, what you did wasn't a mistake. You broke the law, committed fraud, perjured yourself, partnered with criminals. These weren't accidents. You made calculated choices meant to destroy an innocent man's life. He leaned forward, his stare piercing and unflinching through the thick glass between them. Talk to me about the baby. The blood drained from Rachel's face. There was no baby, she whispered. The test was negative. It never... So it was just one more trick, Travis said, his voice flat. Another manipulation to soften me, make me hesitate. She didn't respond, and her silence answered him louder than words. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. Even now, after everything, you can't come clean. You had to sneak in one last deception, one final grasp at control. He rose to his feet, prepared to leave, but her voice stopped him. What happens now? She asked. Travis paused, then turned. His eyes bore into her and she visibly recoiled. Now you deal with the consequences. His voice was even, almost detached, but the words struck with brutal weight. You're being charged. The evidence is enough to hold up in court. Every hidden account has been frozen. The house, our house, is being sold to cover your legal expenses and what you owe in restitution. He went on, his tone still level. Harrison Grant is working with federal investigators. He's trying to save himself, and he's naming everyone involved, especially you. Every falsified document, every corrupt deal. Marcus Torino's doing the same. He's spilling how you tried to use criminals to intimidate me into silence. Rachel sagged in her seat, the burden of reality finally settling on her shoulders. You're looking at 5 to 8 years, Travis continued. And when it's over, you'll walk out with a felony record. No money, no home, no husband waiting to take you back. You'll become exactly what you once accused me of being, alone and broken. She lifted her eyes to his, tears brimming with regret. Travis, please, I know I hurt you, but we had something real, didn't we? Doesn't that mean anything? He stared at her, peeling away the remnants of her performance, searching for something true. What he found wasn't a monster, but a woman consumed by fear, selfishness, and an unwillingness to be accountable. Those years mattered, he said at last. They're why this hurts so much, but they also make your betrayal unforgivable. He placed a hand on the glass, and for just a moment, Rachel saw a glimpse of the man she once loved. I would have given you everything, he said, voice soft with sadness. My faith, my future, everything. All I ever asked for was your honesty. He dropped his hand and stepped back. But you chose lies instead. Turning away, he walked toward the exit. Goodbye, Rachel. I hope prison gives you the clarity you never found outside of it. Behind him, her voice cracked with desperation. Travis, wait, please. But he never turned around. The ghost she had created in him had found its rest. Travis Hunter was no longer haunted by their shared past. Outside, Colin leaned on the hood of the car, watching as Travis approached. How you holding up? He asked. Travis looked once over his shoulder at the building, the jail that now housed the woman who had nearly destroyed him, along with the allies whose schemes were crumbling fast. The threat's gone, he said after a pause, but I don't feel anything. For months, unraveling Rachel's manipulations had been the single thread holding me together. Now that it was over, I was left staring into the void of what came next. Colin gave a slow nod, considering. Maybe that's the point, he said. For the first time in a long time, you're not reacting to someone else's agenda. You get to choose what comes next. Travis eased into his car and twisted the ignition. As the engine hummed and the prison receded in the rearview mirror, a strange emotion crept in, one he hadn't truly felt since before his first deployment. Possibility. Rachel had tried to script a bitter ending for him, one where a fractured soldier collapsed under the weight of his own demons. But Travis had taken control of the story. He'd rewritten it on his own terms, where justice had teeth and predators didn't escape the consequences. The ghost had completed its mission, and Travis Hunter was finally ready to go home. Epilogue. 2 years later, Travis stood silently at the edge of his new backyard, watching sunlight spill across the mountain ridges. The old house, the one Rachel had once sought to claim, was history, sold off to settle legal debts and court-ordered reparations. This place was humbler, but more genuine, It felt like it belonged to him in a way nowhere had since childhood. His phone buzzed. A message from Colin, who now headed a private security outfit. Parole denied. Rachel's staying in. Travis deleted the text without a second thought. She was a ghost from a chapter he'd long since closed, a reminder of how cruelly love can masquerade as something real. He'd kept the vow he made to himself. No absolution, no do-overs, no compassion for the architect of his ruin. The ghost had left a message that Rachel and her allies would carry forever. Not all prey run, some turn and fight. But Travis had moved past being just a weapon shaped by betrayal. He was ready to build something for himself. As the morning sun climbed, he turned and stepped into the house to begin his day. Whatever the future held, he'd meet it head-on, grounded, guarded, and clear-eyed. Some phantoms are meant to linger. Others are meant to be released. And at last, Travis understood which kind he was. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the Force be with you. See you soon, my friend.